In light of everything that is going on in and around me, I choose to be joyful in God. This tells me that joy comes from the Lord and not our circumstances. This tells me that joy comes from experiencing God, not just knowledge about Him. This tells me that joy comes from salvation, what God has done and has promised to continue to do. There's a difference between joy and happiness. He does not say, I will be happy in God. He says, I will rejoice in my God. Joy lasts through all sorts of situations. Joy lasts and continues through trials and tribulations. Joy is on the mountaintop in the dark valley. And it comes from the Lord. It comes from experiencing God, a relationship with God, a walk with God, a life with God. It comes from salvation, knowing what God has done in you and what He has promised to continue to do. This is the joy, this is the hope that should be dripping, oozing off of every single believer and follower of Jesus. If God does not promise to do one other thing for you in your life, you should still be dripping and oozing and overflowing with this kind of joy. Oozing is a nasty word, sorry. Just picture something being squeezed. But maybe that is the picture when life squeezes and presses and crushes, that joy comes out. Because our joy is not in our conditions and our circumstances. It is not in and of this world. Our joy is from God. And it's that kind of joy that makes people's heads turn. The people who are outside, people that don't know Christ, maybe people who don't know are immature in their faith, and they're just coming, that look at it and go, something different, and I want that. And that's where we simply witness, we simply share what God has done in our life. When you can come back with answers and saying, I don't have to understand everything that's going on around me, but I do know who Jesus is, and I know that He promises that He will never leave me nor forsake me. He will not fail me, He will not abandon me, and He will walk me through each and every situation. I'll sidetrack for a moment. Psalm chapter 23, we all know, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It talks about leading us beside still waters and green meadows, pastures, all the good places in life. We like to focus on that. But do you realize that He continues right from the good places, the peaceful places, right into death's darkest valley? The good path with God will lead you there. It's a fact of life. We don't like to experience trials and tribulations. No one does. That's just sick if you do. But it's part of life. And He promises to walk with you through that moment. And He will be our joy. Is this expression by faithfulness? There's a couple different ways that scholars interpret this. This is kind of a tricky saying, and I think the application is beautiful. Some people are divided. They'll say the righteous live by their faithfulness. It's literally by faithfulness. The righteous will live by faithfulness. And so you kind of supply the words there and to God because you're trying to make sense of it. But it's simply the righteous will live by faithfulness. Which brings people to question, whose faithfulness? Some say, God's faithfulness. The righteous will live by the faithfulness of God. That's awesome. Others will say it's by our faithfulness, which is where you get this translation. They will live by their faithfulness to God, by believing God's word and living accordingly. I think we're drawing lines in the sand. I think it's both. The righteous live by faithfulness. Whose faithfulness? God's faithfulness and our response of faithfulness. The righteous will live by both. We recognize that God supplies, that God ordains, that God gives strength, that God is the source, and we live by everything that He gives us. But we also live in a response of worship, in a response of trust, in a response of hope and confidence, and we live in obedience and faithfulness in relationship to that God. Not just following a rule book, but in relationship to Him. The righteous live by faithfulness.